And everyone, welcome to the spoiler room once again. And big surprise, I have some independent horror filmmakers here today to talk about their latest film. I discovered it on social media and it sparked my interest. They were kind enough to let me see a screener of it. Check out my review on YouTube. It's called The Monster Mash, and I am here with Kevin Losani and Richard Terrasi. I hope I pronounced those correctly.
Terrasi, yeah. You got it. You got it right. Yeah.
All right.
Perfect. Perfect.
I have a Polish last name,
Hey,
so
you know what? People tend to call me Terrasi or Terrasi, but it's Terrasi.
I got a lot of that in high school. I got my last name is Krawcheck, but a lot of people said crotch checkers. So there you go. So glad you both could join me today.
Thank you for having us on.
Very happy to it, and very excited to talk a bit about this film. I've watched a lot of indie films, especially a lot of indie creature features, and to have a film like this and seeing what you do, I was very impressed. But what I usually like to do is get in their own words, and it's you can flip a coin, whoever wants to. Just give us a little taste of about what the Monster Mash is about for my listeners.
Well, pretty much it's a celebration of the creature feature days of the times I grew up with watching it on TV with the horror host who would host like these B low budget horror films, usually that pretty much were released in drive-in theaters and then disappeared and then came back on TV on these like either late night horror shows or these creature feature shows. And that's how I got to know a lot of these low budget films. And and a lot of them became classics over time, where a lot of people, love these type of films. And it inspired me to put together a script that celebrated this type of creature feature that I grew up watching with, like I said, usually it's a mad scientist who would host these horror flicks. But we put together, me and Kevin, we put together this film that celebrates this creature feature style thing.
Yeah, the horror host. I love the name of the horror host, Freudstein, or is it Freudstein?
However you want to pronounce it. But that's actually an homage to Lucio Fulci's House by the Cemetery. So that's where I got the name from.
Nice. And Kevin, were you a big fan as well of these types of films?
Not as much as Rich. Rich definitely comes as more the horror aficionado, especially the more of the classic horror films. I mean, you walk into the guy's living room and he's got the movie collection. He's got all the usual suspect movies. He's very well versed in like this genre. So definitely Rich was like the primary vision, and he took the helm on this. And I definitely, I'm a filmmaker, and I've made a lot of movies, and I've made some. I've never made a horror film until this one, but I've dabbled in like the horror genre, and done other films that are more multi-genre. But yeah. So this was my kind of first like big horror film, and Rich and I have collaborated in the past on other projects, so it wasn't our first collaboration. But yeah, no, I definitely like making this movie increase my like love for horror. I like 2022 I watched so many horror films, and like I normally wouldn't, but I really have an appreciation for the art form, and especially the prosthetic effects and all that goes into it. I just think that stuff's amazing, and it's so creative.
Well, Kevin is just, first of all, I met Kevin when around the time I was featuring my second feature film called The Festival, which is loosely based on H.P. Lovecraft's short story. And I met Kevin at that screening, and we became good friends since then. I casted him in my sci-fi thriller, Dark Side of the Moon. And he just has a lot of talent. And he, especially the effects, the prosthetics, there was a scene where I added like this puffed out eye and cuts and stuff on his face. And I mean, he's the type of guy that doesn't give you a problem, because it takes hours to apply that stuff and it's tedious. And he ate it up, man. He had fun. I had loads of fun working with him. And like I said, he's just multi-talented. He's a great editor. He's a great filmmaker and an actor. So he's an all-around dude.
A triple threat, then, is what they call it, right, Kevin?
Yeah, exactly. That's what they call me, the triple threat.
So to prepare for this film, Richard, what did you recommend, or either one of you want to answer? What was the kind of required watching that, like, you started off with? Did you start them off with like The Thing right away, or did you ease them into it with?
That's funny that you said that, because that's well, that's one of my favorite horror films, is John Carpenter's remake of
Same.
Yeah.
and so is Kevin's.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, we actually watched we watched it over my place a couple of times. But the movie that I made him watch, he's never seen it before, was Creepshow.
Oh, nice.
And,
Yes.
to me, that is considered, in my opinion, the best anthology feature film that celebrates the EC Comics and monsters.
Yeah.
And it's done right. And that's what I wanted to do, was go to that old school 80s Creepshow type of film and make it look like it's a product of like the early 80s, and just make it as close, not copying it or anything like that, because I think it has its own unique look to it and story. But I wanted to have that nice Creepshow, George Romero, Stephen King essence to it, like that type of movie, but for a modern audience. But also for people that grew up to creature features and have that nostalgic feeling of remembering those times, because it's a fun film to watch, And that's
what I always sorry, I'm jumping. What I always tell people, my go-to, like if I'm quickly meeting somebody at network and I have my elevator pitch and they're like, "What's your movie? Like explain to me your movie?" I'll always be like, "Just imagine you're opening up a time capsule from 40 years ago and you found this horror film and you watched it, and like this is like we try to do everything from top to bottom to just capture that zeitgeist or that like style of film, from obviously the aesthetic, from the performances, from the stories, and so it felt like something of another time."
And it did. I felt the influences. I've watched many a film, especially growing up in the 80s. As I mentioned when we were talking earlier, I'm the old man of the stream, if you will. I grew up definitely during these films when they were first hitting the direct to video market and that. And this definitely had a feel. I kind of felt not only Creepshow, but a bit of Twilight Zone the movie in here.
I know what you're talking about, the opening scene with Dan Aykroyd.
Yes.
That was sort of an inspiration because of that. It was like Whispering Hollow Road is a road picture.
Yeah.
So the elements, if you notice in the beginning with the prostitute that gets killed in the Giallo Argento style killing, that was my little homage to Argento and Italian Giallo films, but also I'm paying homage to the great Michael Powell of Peeping Tom, because he has a similar opening scene.
Yeah, and that's what I felt when I caught that. I'm like, oh, I know what they're going for right away. The minute you get that shot with the gloves, I'm like, oh, I know what we're going for. It's so, and I loved it. I love the fact that you did that. But you've got other homages in here too. Especially with your creature design. And again, we're not trying to spoil too much, but with your creature design, I really felt those influences from those early films. A little bit. You mentioned the first short, the Whispering Hollow Road. The creature felt a little bit like it had influences from Fright Night in there. The creature a bit, either Fright Night or House. It was hard to tell.
Yeah, what I really wanted to do was bring out some of that Japanese horror.
Oh yeah,
element to it. I'm also a big fan of Japanese horror.
Oh sure.
Whispering Hollow Road, I call Whispering Hollow Road like a dark, shadowy horror noir type of, because it's very shadowy, very dark, with dark characters, and then like you said, it's just like this big explosion at the end of I don't want to give it away, but it's insane.
it went where I did not expect it to, in a brilliant way. Now, how did you shoot the night scenes? Because it didn't look, usually you see day for night, but is that what you use?
We actually shot at night. We had a generator that was like way out there with tons of extension cords.
Sure.
and we had a whole bunch of lights. But
Mhm.
even with the amount of lights that we had, I just felt it was slightly dark.
Mhm.
And I wanted a little brighter, but actually it fits just right for
Mhm.
what the film and the story is. Because it is a dark story and it's very shadowy, and so to me, I think it gives it a better feel that it's very dark.
Yeah, it's actually a technique I learned about because of that
Mhm.
film. It's called chiaroscuro. Chiaroscuro. It's an
Mhm.
Italian word, and it's basically really harsh contrast. It's like when you see just a little, like everything around you is dark, but then you just see
Mhm.
the subject. Because some of those car scenes, like, and that was a product of we didn't have enough light. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
but
Budget,
it
right?
looked
Yeah.
exactly, but it was all like stylistically awesome, and I think it turned out great. And yeah, we shot that in upstate New York, probably about 20-30 miles north of
Mhm.
Syracuse. And you'd be surprised how hard it is to find an abandoned road that nobody drives down. Like,
You
And
bet.
that was courtesy of that man, Kevin. I mean,
yeah, I that was
he
one.
came through with a lot of locations for us.
Yeah, I was looking for those locations, and I had all these, like, I had like my Google Maps was a bunch of pins, and like I would do these, I was like, what? And also to find a road with no, like,
Oh,
lights,
sure.
no lamp.
Mhm.
And I found one that was really good, but still, like, people would drive down it every once in a while, and it's just like, man, it's really hard to find a road nobody drives on.
See, that's why you got to come to Wisconsin and shoot a film.
Yeah,
I could travel 5 minutes from my town in any direction. You got roads no one is on. There's a reason why we inspire horror films so much here in Wisconsin. Is because yeah, you can take a wrong turn and it'll be dark. You won't be able to see anything.
and and
you're
and
right.
the fact that we shot on film.
Right. Mhm.
So the first two stories, Whispering Hollow Road and The House, were both shot
Mm.
on film on Ultra 16 millimeter and Super 16.
Nice.
So it gave it that nice, rich colors,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
natural contrast, and then I also wanted to have like this color palette of blues, dark blues, vibrant blues, some reds, and just like mix it up there, especially at the end when he I don't want to
Yep.
give it away, but when they end up at this other location, and it's just a whole, it's vibrant with all these colors, and that's what I wanted, a nice color palette to each story. I wanted each story represent each story with a different look.
And you do have that because it is more darker and in blues and kind of purples and such tones in that in the first one in Whispering Hollow. And when we go to the house, uh it has kind of that Amityville, the old school Amityville
Mhm.
type color palette to it.
Right,
Mhm. Exactly.
And I love that. And
Perfect comparison.
oh, thanks. Yeah, well, so you accomplished it because I saw it. I'm like, oh, this is going to be house type horror. Now, again, not spoiling it. It doesn't. We do have a creature in here, but it just you could tell the differences, and I like that because sometimes you get horror anthologies, especially when it's made by the same filmmakers. Uh, there's a little hard to see a separation between the stories. They tend to be a little similar, but I think you really have a contrast of different types of
Yeah,
stories.
I really, when I put together the script, I wanted to make sure that each story was totally different from one another. I didn't
Yeah.
want nothing to mimic any, like I didn't want anything to resemble or mimic or any of those stories, and be like, oh, this is the same bullshit, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's very creep show esque, and also it
Mhm.
keeps it fresh. You know what I mean? Like, I
Sure.
think, it's always, you just watch the whole feature, and it's just like it's always delivering you something new.
yeah, and then I remember like discussing with Kevin when we were working on Homebound Horror. We really wanted to give it that like grindhouse, grimy look to it, because you got a bunch of sleaze bags in that movie.
Oh, yeah, yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. We'll talk about them in a minute, but but with housebound horror, I don't want to give away what the creature is, but I was very impressed with the design of the creature. How much work went into that? Because your creature in the house surprised the hell out of me because
You're
I've
talking
seen
about Whispering or
or
the house?
the house
Okay,
because in the house when the creature's revealed of what it is, I was
Mhm.
impressed by how well it looked, because I think it's a genre of film that is needing more films in it, but it's hard to do that type of creature well. So
Yes.
I mean, how, how much planning went into that
Well,
creature?
here's the thing: is when I wrote the script and I was talking to Kevin, I said I want to do an all practical effect transformation.
Right.
And and I don't want to make it cheap looking. I want to make it look. I'm no Rick Baker. I'm not a Rob Bottin, but you know what? I know what my limits are, and
Mhm.
I know I could do a pretty damn good job. So I wanted to do an all practical transformation, and I designed and created the whole transformation of that sequence in that bedroom. And I created that werewolf right there that you see
Nice.
next to the window, and this werewolf right here, which is the ultimate werewolf.
Yes.
That was sculpted and designed by Kyle Thompson of Midnight Studios Effects.
Oh, okay.
So it just alleviated me because it was too
Sure.
much workload for me.
It's gorgeous. I mean, frighteningly gorgeous. If you could say grotesquely gorgeous. I don't know how you would put it, uh, but where did the story for Homebound Horror come from? Was it influenced? Was there a particular film or films that kind of influenced that one?
um, Actually, that started all from a Jimi Hendrix song.
Really?
Uh, yeah, and then I discussed with Kevin. I was like, I envisioned what's the song? Voodoo Child.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, uh, that song playing, and I just see this man wearing these denim blue jeans with black boots, some blood sprinkled on his pants,
Hmm.
and he's carrying a sort of shotgun, and it starts at his feet, and he's walking, and it just pans up, and we just see this faceless uh person, bloodied, and he has a shotgun, and he's out for revenge. And what I did was I just built it from there. I wrote a vague storyline for it in the script because I knew Kevin was going to revise it because he was going to direct it. So he took off with that, and he made this like whole like comic bookish, crazy, uh,
I
insane story.
Homebound Horror. What I enjoyed about Homebound Horror, and I appreciated it quite a bit, uh, because Kevin, you directed that one, correct? How you brought it back around, because you get a segment in the beginning that I'm like, how's this going to relate? Because we never really get back to it until near the very end, and then I was like, oh, they brought it back. Okay, great. You brought it full circle for the explanation of why you had
Yeah.
the quote unquote hero that you did in here. And I loved that. I was happy that you did that, because sometimes you do get gimmicks or elements that happen that never pay off. You're
Well,
like,
we really wanted to have sympathy for Victor,
yeah,
the sheriff,
yeah, you
because
Yes.
do. Mhm.
everybody got done because they were there at the wrong time.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, what you're talking about, Mark, is the cold open with the sheriff in the
Right.
car and
Yeah.
then seeing the extraterrestrial, because that's
That.
what that really is. It's a cold open. Like the
Yep.
movie technically starts after that, because then the
Mhm.
credit, well, there's no opening credits, but then you have the montage where you get introduced to
Right.
the city. But yeah, that's basically a cold open, and yeah,
Right.
that's and it is cool because like I'm glad you pointed that out, and it's I think it's a good payoff too, because like you have to, yeah, and there are movies that do, they'll just they'll do something that just looks cool or something, and then it's just like, wait, what was the point of that again? you know like there's got to be, yeah. And yeah, what Rich was saying about the share, because I watched your YouTube review, and it was
Oh,
really
sure.
good, and you brought up a really cool point about the sheriff's role in the story, and like what he was, because there's kind of like these A and B, well, there are these A and B stories, right? You
Mhm.
have the sheriff storyline, and then you have like the gang storyline, right?
And then you have the
Victor,
love
Right.
interest, also
Yeah.
the whole thing with him, Victor.
well, Victor and the gang is one
Mhm.
through line, and then you have the sheriff's through line, and then there's like a collision. But the sheriff's through line was really important to the story at the end, because Victor goes on a bit of he goes on a revenge spree,
Mhm.
and a lot of the bad guys get taken out, but it was really important to me, and Rich knows this too, that there was an innocent, so to speak, like revenge is sloppy, revenge
Yeah,
is dirty,
it is. Yeah.
and there's gonna be some collateral damage, so to speak.
Right.
And so it makes it a little bit more gray. There's more gray area to it, I
Mhm.
suppose.
Right. And like I stated before, it's all about being at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Mhm.
Definitely.
For all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it is pretty much for all of it. And I gotta tell you, you came up with one of the. Where did you find for your casting? Where did you find for the villain? Because your villain in this is I've not seen someone. I think the closest is Jason Momoa in Fast X, who just chew. If you've not seen it yet, he plays a bad guy there, and he eats. He doesn't just eat up the scenery; he like devours
Nice.
it to the point of you don't care about anything but him. You want to see more of him. I
But,
felt like
Hmm.
that with your villain.
well, here's the thing. I don't know if you noticed. The villain, who's the boss of the cartel in Homebound Horror,
Yeah.
plays three characters in the movie. And all of the Monster Mash. He's Dr. Freudstein.
Oh, okay.
He's Andrew Lakewood in Whispering Hollow Road,
Right. Okay.
and the boss.
Because he was fantastic in all the roles, but especially I just loved this villain. I'm like, wow, I haven't seen like a authentic, like genuinely feeling vile bad guy in a while.
Yeah, he was cold, man. And yeah, that's Michael Gentile, and he's one of the few actors that can pull something like that off, and you just let him do him. He knew, we talked about what that character was. It
Mhm.
was a ruthless, crime lord, and this is a guy who's like, yeah, it was so funny because like I remember some moments when in the directing with him, it was always like more
Yeah.
ruthlessness, like more just like, and yeah, a plus performance, man. And yeah, he was
What
great. He was great.
what
Yeah,
are
I
the
could.
what? Oh, go ahead.
Unfortunately, he passed away
Hmm.
almost 2 years ago from cancer.
Oh,
Oh,
that is
he's no
yeah.
longer with us.
Well,
Huge bummer.
you've got his talent captured in
Yeah,
your film,
he was
and
definitely a talented actor.
uh,
He was a great character actor.
mhm.
There was even moments. Yeah, I mean, he's a legend. I listen. We could do a whole podcast on him and how awesome he is. But I remember a specific moment going back to how he was just so good in character and staying in character. There's a funny outtake, and like when you're directing somebody and you feed him a line,
Mhm.
like there was the moment when he was chopping up the
Yeah.
snitch. He was like, there was a line I had to feed him, and he knew the line, but he was just waiting for it. There was like kind of a moment, and I fed
Yeah.
him the line, and he just looked at me and he goes, "Hold your fucking horses, Losani." Like didn't break character at all.
I actually have that in the bonus features for the Blu-ray. It's going to be
Nice.
the making of the Monster Mash. So you'll actually
Yeah.
see that.
Oh, nice, nice. I look forward to seeing that because what I also love, what I also thought was unique about your bad guy in Homebound Horror is he was in a wheelchair, and I'm like, and I'm like, it's sitting there at first going, wait, is he just in a wheelchair because he doesn't want to? And I'm like, no, this guy is just like he's like Potter from It's a Wonderful Life, but if Potter was in a Grindhouse film, and you, he's just like, and I'm like, that was a unique decision to make because usually in films when you have someone bound to a wheelchair or whatnot, you have some sympathy of some kind for that character. You have
Correct.
no sympathy for this. I don't care that he's in a wheelchair.
And that's part of the point, Mark, too. That's the point, like, because that was a stereotype I personally wanted to break. We had a
Sure.
conversation about this at a film festival at Dark Side of the Moon, and
Mhm.
I had the idea because it's basically based on a real person who was
Mhm.
there was like a big underground crime person in Syracuse that was in a wheelchair, and I heard these stories about him that like, you know, he was this like really tough ruthless dude who would, you know, boss people around and have all these chicks. And I'd be like, it's so interesting because you think, like you said, and I said exactly what you said. I go, you think of like, oh no, poor guy in a wheelchair, like, you know, you feel bad for him, but then you don't think of some, you don't think of somebody in a position of power. And that's just like, I don't know why, that's just kind of a cultural thing we have, but I thought flipping that on his head, and that's when I brought it up to Michael Gentile, and he was, you know, Michael Gentile, he's an actor, he wants a challenge, so
Right.
so
For that, yeah, he ate that up.
yeah, just knocked it out of the park. So yeah, that was that's kind of the backstory for how we came to that decision.
That, yeah, because he was definitely memorable. In that, so were the two henchmen. I loved the interaction between your two henchmen in this. The psycho and you know, the guy who's like, maybe I signed up for the wrong gig.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's one of, yeah, because like one of the guys is definitely there for more of the sadistic pleasure, and the other guy is kind of more, he's more business, right?
He's more business.
This is it's business for him. He's not like really getting so much enjoy. He's like a guy who goes to work every day and does what he has to do, gets by. And but the other guy, he loves it. He loves all the sick, twisted things he gets to do in this crazy career path he's chosen.
Yeah, so yeah, I enjoyed that dynamic, and it does with your Victor character. I did not expect the Victor character to go where it did, and how it all comes to, you know, a climax at the end like that. It definitely felt that grindhouse feel. I think you captured that well. Now, was that shot on film as well, or was that shot?
That was shot on digital.
That was on.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, sadly, no. I mean, I look back and it's one of those things where it's like I wish we did shoot that on film, but it was the right decision because I actually don't have that much experience shooting on film. And Homebound Horror, of the three films, is, I think it's safe I think I'm not out of line saying it was the most ambitious in terms of like most characters, most sets, a lot of effects. It was production wise, it was probably one of the most ambitious.
Blood.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had an actual squib. I was surprised at that too. I'm like, wow, hey, look, actual squib. Oh wow.
Yeah. So with those reasons, that's why
Sure.
it's like, I better shoot this on digital because like I need to stick with what I know, and that would have just slowed us down immensely. But you know, like we other people have pointed out that it does stand out in the aesthetic, and like we did our best to try to get it to look as one cohesive, like, you know, 16 millimeter.
Well, no, it's still, you did a better job than I've seen a lot of people do it. Usually, a lot of people go way overboard with the aesthetic. You know, like they like, oh, they saw what Tarantino and Rodriguez did with Grindhouse,
And they'll
but
they'll have all those scratches and pops, and it's way they overdo.
Yeah, they up it. They're like, oh, well, that's not enough. We didn't. They did. Rodriguez and Tarantino didn't put enough in it. I got to put more in it, and you don't have that here. And I thought it played out well. It mixed well, especially with it being separated by your horror host. You know, I think that helps break it up a bit to where I think, especially those who may not notice it or just more casual viewers, probably got to, you know, not notice too much difference between it, you know, because you do match that aesthetic fairly well.
And like I said earlier, is that our goal was to make each story look different from one another.
Right. And that fits for all three of them. You know, and I guess working on a limited budget that you guys did actually helped not just capture the spirit, but actually go into the same methods that they used back then, making the creature features, right?
I mean, just like Robert Rodriguez said many times, when you're on a limited budget, that's when sometimes the most creative things happen on set and flourish and comes out great, better than if you actually did have a budget.
Yeah, you know, that's always one of those things where I always would love to see like a reality show where they take like a big named, you know, director and give them the budget of like, here's $15,000, go make a feature. You know, go back to your roots.
I wouldn't know what to do.
They're like, well, there's the catering bill. What's the rest of my budget gonna be?
To us, that, you know, we can make 15,000 look like 100,000. You know,
sure.
we know how to work around getting sets on a limited budget you know, with getting stuff for nothing, you know, practically nothing.
Sure.
But you know, our goal is to, you know, initially, you know, move up the ladder and
Well, yeah,
get a budget and make something bigger with an initial budget.
Well, you know, and it's one of those things where though I appreciate the spirit, and you're right about the creativity. I interviewed Patrick Reed Johnson, who directed a large number of films. He was an AD on some, but he did Spaced Invaders back in the 80s, 89 or 90. It was a little alien feature film. And he talked about he worked on a very limited budget for that film. It got wide release, but he had guys like from ILM and that coming across, like driving a half hour an hour to work on his little film because they got to be creative because he's working on a limited budget versus having all these tools. They came up with like inventive ways to make the miniatures and everything. And so,
Right.
Yeah, and you'll be quite surprised on how you'll have, like, you know, special effects artists that are willing to go and work and do some stuff on a low budget because they know they can be more creative when they don't have people over their backs telling them, you know, what they want and what to do. Meanwhile, they have full creative control.
sure. Yeah. And so, yeah, and you get some really wild stuff like you have in your film, in your anthology. Now, Kevin, for securing locations, you always hear kind of horror stories about that. How much of a challenge was it to secure the locations? Because you do have a lot of locations across your three films.
Yeah, I think back on it, and it's like we really did pull off some amazing locations, and I mean, it was just I just remember having my head down and pulling every single favor. I'm out of favors. I can't ask anybody for anything anymore because I literally just I just kept asking and kept asking. I called up everybody I knew, and I did a lot of research. I did a lot of driving around, searching, and like visiting places. It was a lot of effort, but no, we had a couple really close. I have a lot of contacts in Syracuse. I'm from the Syracuse area, so it's where I grew up, and I know a lot of the people in the film scene there. And for one of my good friends, Jody Pacello, he was huge in terms of getting us a couple locations. So the one for Homebound Horror, he got us this whole warehouse, and he knew a bunch of he knows like a real estate guy who owns a lot of like the commercial stuff. And he's like, look, I got this warehouse. They're going to be demoing it in a few months. He goes, it's all yours. He goes, you can do whatever you want to do in it. He goes, you can spray. I'm like, we can just like break shit and like spray blood everywhere. And he's like, it's fine. He's like, they're going to redo the whole thing. And I'm like, Rich, we could go crazy in here.
Oh my. and the best was, hey, Rich, I got the abandoned gas station. Oh, great. How'd you get it? Do you know somebody? Did somebody help you out getting it? No. I was like, what do you mean, no? Just found it. All right. So I guess we're just going to film there. Yeah. So we actually filmed in this abandoned gas station with no permits, no permission. We just winged it. We got all the shots done and we got the fuck out of there.
It's true indie.
That's guerrilla filmmaking.
Yes. Yes.
True indie spirit right there. I love it.
Yeah, that's in Whisper and Hollow Road. Well,
yeah.
It's one of the funniest parts in the whole anthology. I can always laugh at is when Gentile's character, he goes, "Oh, Sky, look, there's your gas station."
Yeah.
Let's pull, and then it cuts to the most creepiest location. If you were to like close your eyes and be like, think of the most creepiest rundown location you can possibly imagine. Just hard cut, smash to it, and I laugh every time.
The dilapidated structure that's falling apart.
It's so creepy.
There's absolutely nothing that says, "Oh, this is a good place to pull over and call a tow truck." No. It was a great location, though. Yeah, it was really creepy. What about for your middle story, the house that location? I loved that house that you got.
So that's another one that I had through a contact. A friend's brother and his sister-in-law. They had this big property that they rented out for like weddings. They called it the Kester Homestead. And you saw the house, you saw the establishing shots. I showed it to Rich, and he was like, "Yes, immediately, we need to get it."
I wanted a Gothic house, so I wanted this film to kind of look like a modern Hammer Gothic film.
Yeah, and I think you accomplished at that location. I loved that house. I was like, it it's always great when you pick a location that has its own character, where it's almost its own character.
Well, that's
Yep.
what I wanted, was the house
Yeah.
was a character in the
Mhm.
film itself. And if you know, I don't know if you noticed, but we only shot the exterior parts of
Mhm.
the house. The interior of the house was actually shot at a different location, where we shot all the interior shots. That I rented a house
Oh, okay.
and we shot all the interior stuff in there.
Well, it
Well, everything
matched.
that you see outside is the Kessler house that
Mm.
Kevin got. We shot all the exterior shots out there, and then all the interior shots was this other house that I rented for the scenes.
Well, it matched up really well, because you couldn't quite tell it. It was like it worked well. I'm like, oh, this, you know. So yeah, and then for your casting, were these a lot of people that you already had worked with, or did you do a lot of auditions in that? Because especially now, I mean, we're kind of on the end of where it's things have kind of, routines have kind of normalized, but
Well,
during the pandemic and that, a lot of people were doing video interviews or video auditions. Did you do a lot of those, or?
we started production pre pandemic.
Okay.
We
Mhm.
started production in 2018, late 2018.
Oh, okay.
We casted. We first casted people for Homebound Horror.
Mm,
Uh,
mhm,
Rashad Milner actually worked on a project with Kevin and some other filmmaker. I think it was Chris
Ooh,
Russell,
yep. It was a web series flyer, and yep,
mhm,
and that's how we got Rashad.
Rashad.
And then Michael Gentile, we already knew from Dark Side of the Moon, which I
mhm,
casted him. I had him, come in for in an audition, so we knew Michael Gentile since
mhm.
Dark Side of the Moon. But all the other characters, Kevin got on his side.
Nice.
And then
Yeah.
and then for the house, uh, William Cozy, who plays Creighton Reed, I already worked with him on the festival, which was my second feature film.
Okay.
So he's another great actor and a great person to work with. Monica Sharma was actually casted from me. Actually, she worked with Michael Gentile. I don't know. I believe it was on a play or
Mm.
another film project, and he referred me to her, and I had her do an audition and casted her.
I
Cherry.
think that I think it wasn't like Cherry, Monica, and Tim Whalen were, I think, the only people that, I had Jose, and then that did like real auditions. Most of the people were people that we'd worked with in the past.
Sure. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
except for Cherry Fu and Monica Sharma.
And then yeah, exactly.
And the way Cherry Fu plays her character, I'm like
Oh,
sitting
it's
there
brilliant.
going, I'm just sitting there going, I'll call you a tow truck. Just stay here. You're good. We're good. You just stay.
Well, what I wanted for her character is she's way out there
Yeah.
for what reasons, but I really wanted her character to be like really out there, very surreal.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be something that you see all the time in other films. I really wanted her character to be way out there and
Mhm.
very surreal, very dream. I wanted the whole story to be like very dreamlike and like some sort of like fever dream.
Yeah,
And I
Cherry definitely added a lot to that.
Mhm.
With her performance, she added a lot to the tone of the film and the story. It was unexpectedly awesome what she did.
Yeah,
I
she
mean,
worked.
she came in when I had the audition, and she came in Shetler Studios, and she was like, boom, that's how she came in, already in character. And she like,
Hmm.
out of all the you know
Mhm.
people that came in for that audition, she nailed it.
Mhm.
She nailed it.
And yeah, she's very effective there. What's also effective is some of your horror gimmicks in here. And I always love asking this
Hmm.
question.
Hmm.
Was there ever a point where you said, maybe we shouldn't do this? Because you have like a moment in almost every one of the shorts that is an extreme horror gimmick. I mean, especially Whispering Hollow Road. And then, but in all three, you have a pretty extreme practical
Well,
graphic horror scene.
well, you know what? In today's age,
Mhm.
everybody's pushing the envelope, and you have to push the envelope if you want your film to actually be seen and
Mm.
people to talk about it? Like for example, and I'm kind of getting tired of bringing it up, but like Terrifier. If it
Yeah, me too.
wasn't for the girl in half in the first Terrifier, and then in the second Terrifier, the brutal mutilation kill. People always talk about that, so you have to push the envelope because that you gotta make something that is effective for people to like really talk about and for people to come back to your film and rewatch it over and over.
Was there anything that you came up with that you chose not to because it was too extreme, or did you just like, yeah, let's go for it?
Well, I mean, I've had this discussion with Kevin many times. Is Kevin's character Paul in the house?
Sure.
I want in the script, his death was supposed to be more brutal.
Oh, okay.
Because of time constraints and running out of time, running out of film, running out of money, and running out of time to shoot in the house. We had to narrow it down to what I mean. It's still effective.
Sure.
For other people who watch the movie, they're gonna be like, oh, that's great. But for me, I really wanted to nail his death scene and really like I wanted it to be really brutal.
He really wanted your death to be brutal, Kevin. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I thought it was quite brutal. I remember filming that stuff, and it was pretty crazy. Dude, we got some good behind the scenes footage where I was like, when you really want to get into that state of pure fear, right, and pure like you got to get your heart rate up, and you got to really like have the physical. And I remember being like, "Whoa, I feel this is." It was like intoxicating,
And it looked great. It still looked great. It was very effective. I dug that gimmick quite a bit.
Yeah, the basement.
I loved it too.
The basement scene, without giving away what happens. I really wanted to do something that like threw people. I wanted to throw a curveball because I really wanted the unexpected to happen in that basement scene.
I love that just it felt the randomness, but at the same time I loved it because it captured exactly what you were going for all the way through is that spirit of those type of films to where you just get a random gimmick like and it works and it fits in the story, but you're like, well, that was kind of out of no, that is not how I expected that to go leading up to it. But at the same time, I thought it was great. It was fun. So is your whole movie. And I guess one of the things I really do am always interested in is everybody probably always asks, what's your hardest scene? I guess for each of you, and Kevin, if you want to go first, what would you consider the easiest scene or the scene that you thought was going to be hard, but ended up being like just cake, like just easy as pie?
Oh, okay. I actually have one. Well, so there's a part where the two henchmen pick up Victor after he's exiting the flower shop, and then they get into like a little scuffle. That originally was I thought that was going to be like this crazy choreographed fight scene, and it was going to be tough to pull off, but we had no time and we're losing sunlight. And I remember we were just like, I had like, I think I had planned like the gimbal shots and like all these things, what I was going to do. And then I remember earlier we were shooting the other stuff, and I was like, okay, we literally got 26 minutes to shoot this. I was like, Ro, my two henchmen friends, one of the henchmen is one of my best friends, and I was just like, guys, I'm just grabbing the camera and putting it in my hands, and we're doing this. Let's roll. And we just like whipped that together. I think it was literally 26 minutes. We had to shoot all that stuff from like the fight, throwing them in the truck, and I thought that came out really good. I guess it was, but it was just, I guess, I don't, maybe it's not quite answering your question, but it was one of those things where it was supposed to be this big elaborate set piece and choreography. And it turned out just to be guy holding a camera, swinging it around, getting the shots quickly. You got 2 takes. Let's do it. Boom. And we're moving on. And I love that little part, it's just like a little quick.
It's effective. And in all honesty, it gave it just that little like anchor of realism for the fight. Like this felt like almost like a real fight, not so much staged as in this actually felt like real. Like that, I've witnessed it, unfortunately, where guys just have walked up to another guy and just start pounding, Alcohol was involved. Big
True.
surprise. I know, but I've seen it. I've not been a victim, but I've seen it. So that's what it felt like. It. So I thought that was, you know,
That's a great point. It was really raw, and I think that's what I liked. I mean, in my mind, it was this great John Wick thing, but but it had to be this like real raw document, like you said, just like gritty.
it worked. And what about you? What about you, Richard? Did you have one
Well,
where it was a easy shot, or it just
I'll
it
tell
went?
you, Whispering Hollow Road. I thought that was going to be an easy shoot, and it turned
Yeah,
out to be one of the most challenging shoots I've ever done.
really.
Because shooting at night,
Mm,
exteriors on an empty road, in the middle of the woods, in the sticks, and doing those shots in the inside of the interior of a car
mhm.
was the most tedious, difficult challenge I've experienced in all my films that I've done.
Sure.
Uh, it's just getting proper lighting, things going wrong. The generator was making too much noise. We had to bring it more out there, and it was insane. And it was a long, grueling shoot. I mean, we were out there till like what, like 6 in the morning.
Mhm.
Every no, yeah, we were up there until sunrise every morning. We had to shoot until it's funny. Usually, you think of film shoots, people shoot until it gets dark. We had to film until it got
To get
light.
light, yeah.
Yeah,
With like maybe two, if we were lucky, like 2 hours of sleep.
yeah.
But I mean, that I would say Whispering Hollow Road was probably my most challenging shoot, and learned a lot from it.
Sure.
I would say the house uh was probably the easiest,
Mhm.
and certain, but except for
The climax
the
part of it, I
climax
imagine.
and the
Yeah,
creature stuff at
sure.
the end. That was intense because there was a lot of prepping to do, a lot of
Mhm.
effects, the blood. We had Megan Reed, who is the other special effects artist on set, doing other effects stuff. We had to wait for her to be done. So it was a lot of
Hmm.
time consuming stuff, but all in all the besides the effect stuff,
Sure.
all the interior shots with just the characters, getting to know one another in the house, going through all those scenes. It was fairly simple.
Yeah, and they're still effective. You need those beats enough to where you get to learn the characters, but it doesn't overextend its welcome, which I appreciate because in some scenes, even in short films, you're like, there's going to be a creature in here at some point because right now they're still talking.
Yeah,
Well, that
exactly.
was the nail biter for me, is because we spent so much time shooting all those dialogue scenes with
Mhm.
the characters in the house, that when it came to shooting the scenes with the creature stuff and the big effect scenes, we're like, shit, are we gonna have enough time to shoot all that stuff? That was a nail biter. Yeah, making sure that we got all that stuff in the can. Most of it did. Some of it, unfortunately, didn't get shot, which I really wanted, but we got most of it in. I would say 90% of the Monster Mash, what was in on the script, we got 90% shot of what's
Yeah,
script. I gotta say, it's probably the most we've gotten uh out of all my feature films. The Monster Mash is probably the most complete,
Mhm.
that is, you know, identical to the script,
Nice. Yeah,
where we didn't have to change much.
you don't always get that. You hear that when you hit time constraints or money constraints, which what usually is. You're like, well, this scene's gone.
Yeah,
Oh, this is gone.
and it happens. I mean,
Yeah. So, well, I know you guys are busy guys. I thank you for stopping by. I guess the final thing I'd like to touch on is what would you give advice, whoever wants to go first, to say an indie filmmaker out there who wants to do a practical effect creature feature versus digital, which I encourage. But what kind of advice, like what's like a key piece of advice that you learned while doing this that you would give them if they came to you and said, "Hey, I want to do a creature feature. You got any advice?"
yeah, definitely make sure you have everything planned out.
Hmm.
That's very important. Uh, and something that I definitely learned myself is to make sure you have storyboards. It would help you out tremendously, and that's something that I want to do for the next feature, because I think storyboards will definitely help you plan and map out your shots, your scenes, especially effect stuff. And also just go out and make a fucking film. Don't let fear get in the way. Don't let that fucking wall block you. Break through it. Just do it. You know, don't let people talk. As long as you think you financially you can do it, don't let anything or anyone scare you from, you know, stopping you from letting your dreams come true. Because I've taken film courses, but I've never went to film school. I was self-taught. All right. And this is my actually fifth feature film, but my very first feature film, because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, it was never completed, unfortunately. Sure. So, but this is my fourth feature film that I've worked on, and each film I've learned more and more, to the point where next time I go ahead and you know, work on another film, I know what to expect and what to do better.
Nice. Well, what about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of those sentiments, but I would say, you know, have a plan, but be prepared to throw that plan out the window. As I gave a example of, you know, that's the case. That always happens with filmmaking, because you know, you want to have like a really set plan and everything goes right, but you also got to be able to pivot, and you got to be flexible, and you can't be hard-headed and be like, no, but I had it in my mind this way. It's like you gotta roll with the punches. If you're working with a lot of practical effects or even visual effects in general, just if you think you're going to do it in this X amount of time, multiply that by 4, maybe 10. And then that's realistically how long it's going to take you. And then lastly, like, you know, this is for everything, but I think you got to give yourself room to play. You know what I mean? Like, make sure you're like letting your all your creative people have fun in a way. Don't be too strict on things. Like, yeah, exactly. That's my exact philosophy. Is like you gotta let the magic happen a little bit, and you just got to be able to feel like it's very intuitive, man. You know, and with experience, you learn. And then, like what Rich said, just get it done, roll up your sleeves, and finish the damn movie, and move on, learn from it, and, you know, put the notch under your belt and move forward.
Yeah, I don't think any filmmaker I've ever talked to said that their first film was just gold. Oh, I love it. They're like, I don't want anyone ever to see my first.
Look, between all my, I always look at it as, every time I look at my films, it's like, oh man, how could I could have done that better. You know, it's like I can never look at it where it's never perfect for me. It's like how I could have made that better, or how I could have shot that better. But the best saying, which came from John Landis, is the greatest accomplishment is finishing a fucking movie.
Just finishing it. Just finishing it.
True.
Yeah.
You got to tip your hat to anybody that just finishes the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know some films that have taken 8-10 years to make, or like I mentioned, Patrick Reed Johnson, his film that finally came out, 5/25/77, that like took him like 20 years from like start to finish to actually get done, and he kept tweaking it, and he had to make some more effects and such to get it distributed, but he finally got it out. But it took him a long time.
It does. And that's another thing. It's like I've learned in my life, I've learned that in recent years, it's like I'm a little more cautious now about what projects I sign up for and do. And because it's like, I think of it as this way: you better be prepared to spend years of your life dedicated to this thing. It's like, you know, Monster Mash took us a little longer than it should have, in the sense of, for me personally, I was doing like freelance production, and I was juggling around all these projects, and I thought I could do my own movie and work on, you know, gigs. And that was the rude awakening, in the sense of like trying to be too ambitious, like putting so much on your plate. But yeah, I mean, but these are commitments, is like, that's basically the succinct point I'm trying to make.
Right. And then you had the pandemic to actually put us on hold for
right.
Yeah.
That put a lot of people on hold and a lot of projects on hold. So
yep, exactly.
So what's next for you? Whoever wants to go first, what do you got coming up?
Well, my thing is I want to make a another feature film that has to do with it's my favorite creature and my favorite genre. Where another werewolf flick,
Oh,
just
nice.
a feature film about werewolves. Yeah.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Well,
Awesome.
like I mentioned before, I don't think we've got enough good werewolf film. I mean, there's some out there that are kind of like, you're like, that was a werewolf film. But I think that's a genre that still has a lot to explore out of your 3 or 4 classic creatures.
Well,
I think.
that's the thing is I feel like I didn't do justice. Well,
Mhm.
then again, I'm always critiquing myself, but I
Right.
didn't do justice with the transformation in the Monster Mash. So
Mhm.
with the next feature, it's going to be an all practical. I really want this to be like fucking awesome transformation, where at least it could stand with the big guns like an American Werewolf, the Howling,
Right.
Dog Soldiers. You know,
Oh, all great, great flicks there, for sure, and very memorable transformations. But yeah,
I mean,
well,
even though Dog Soldiers didn't really have a transformation, but to me, it's number
no,
3 as my favorite werewolf film.
yeah, well, no, the creature design though in general of the werewolf in Dog Soldiers is just phenomenal. I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
Uh,
Bob Keane did the werewolves and the
mhm.
effects. Yeah.
Better than the Howling sequels. We'll put you.
I don't even want to go there.
You don't want to do country line dancing in the dark. You want to talk about a dimly lit scene.
And the Howling 2 was like, oh my god, like
Fun movies, but yeah, rough, to be sure. And what's up for you, Kevin?
Right now, yeah, I'm editing a short film I directed, shot
Nice.
it in 2021, and it's actually got a couple people from the Monster Mash. Michael Gentile, one of them. It's one of his last performances, and he's great. And then the one of the henchmen, the sadistic, crazy white guy henchman, he's the star of this film. It's his like loosely based on his life.
Oh wow.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah,
Nice.
he's an interesting cat to say the least, and another full podcast we can reserve. But yeah. So I'm editing that, and I got a couple other projects coming down the pike, and I'm
Fantastic.
just sort of like consolidating a bunch
Mhm.
of projects and doing some housekeeping, digital housekeeping.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah, you
yeah,
digital hoarders, aren't we all? It's like I've got
uh-huh.
footage. I'm like, I could delete this. Nah, just put it on a hard drive. I never know. You might need it later or something to want to
Yeah.
look back to it. So well, I thank you both very much. The Monster Mash, it's not out yet, folks, but things are in the works. Don't want to spoil or jinx anything, but as you mentioned, there are things in the works.
we'll
Possibly
definitely
later.
have a release date coming up soon. It
Mhm.
most likely in the late summer.
Awesome. Awesome. So keep an eye out for it, folks, especially if you like your practical effects creature features. I was very surprised by it in a great way. And it's been a great conversation talking to you both quite a bit. Do you have a website or whatnot where they can keep track of you of your upcoming
Yeah,
stuff?
absolutely. They can all visit darkvisionfilms.com.
Mhm.
We're also on Twitter, Dark Vision Films, and Instagram, the Monster Mash movie, and also TikTok, Dark Vision Films.
Awesome. Any
Yeah.
additional socials for you, Kevin?
Just I have an Instagram handle, an IMDb page, and it's just my
Okay.
first and last name, Kevin Losani, at Kevin Losani. So if you just Google
Fantastic.
Kevin Losani, I think I'm the only one. So
If you Google his name, make sure safe search is on. There you go. That is,
And then
yeah, you
also
go.
the
Exactly.
Monster Mash
Exactly.
on IMDb also.
Yep. IMDb will put links in the web page for this episode, and I'll include that in the description as well. So thank you very much. And yeah, when it does get released, you got something else in the works. Love to have you back. This has been a lot of fun.
Definitely.
So
Thanks for having us on.
thank you very much. And yeah, folks, check it out. Keep an eye out for Monster Mash. It's not the Transylvania twist, but
The Monster Mash.
it is twisted. So there you go.